AITA for not cleaning before my husband's friends came because I was tired. My boyfriend thinks it's my duty and that I should clean whenever he wants. I'll have to re-educate him. Hi everyone, I've been sitting on this for a couple of days now and I can't stop replaying the situation in my head, so I figured I'd share it here to get some perspective. I, 30F, live with my husband, 32M, and we've been married for 4 years. We don't have kids yet, but we both work full-time. I work the typical 9 to 5 schedule in a fairly demanding office job that often leaves me mentally exhausted by the end of the day. He works second shift, from around 3 p.m. to midnight, sometimes a little later. From the beginning of our marriage, we never had a formal discussion about chores, but we kind of fell into a rhythm. I do the bulk of the household chores, cleaning, cooking, dishes, organizing, scheduling maintenance, taking care of the dog, restocking household supplies, pretty much everything. My husband helps with laundry and occasionally vacuums the floors when he notices they are getting particularly bad. But overall, I take on the majority of the housework, and honestly, most of the time, I am okay with that. It gets done the way I like it, and on my own schedule, without having to nag anyone. He's always been appreciative, saying things like, "The house looks great, thanks for doing this," and if I ask him to help with something specific, he usually does it without much complaint. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. However, the past few weeks have been exceptionally stressful for me. My department has been short-staffed, and my workload has doubled. I come home and barely have the energy to cook dinner, let alone deep clean the house. So yes, I have fallen behind on some of the usual cleaning. The floors haven't been mopped in a couple of weeks, there's some clutter here and there, and I definitely haven't scrubbed the bathroom counters recently. It's not a disaster, but it's not spotless either. Now here's where things start to get tense. Lately, my husband has been having friends over after work. He gets off late and I'm usually in bed by the time he gets home, so this is all happening while I'm asleep. I don't mind the idea in general, he doesn't get to socialize much with his schedule, and I like that he has a life outside of work. That said, in the past, if he mentioned that people would be coming over, I would make sure the house was at least tidy. That was my default reaction. But it was always with some advanced notice and on a day when I still had some energy left. A few nights ago, he told me he would be having some friends over. But this time, he told me just a couple hours before I was heading to bed. I had already had a long day, and I was drained. Completely drained. My brain felt like it was wrapped in fog and my limbs were heavy. I had barely made it through cooking dinner. So, I did the bare minimum, I washed the dishes from dinner, took out the trash because it smelled, and made sure there wasn't anything glaringly gross in the kitchen. Then I got ready for bed and went to sleep. I woke up sometime around 3 in the morning and noticed my husband wasn't in bed. That wasn't too unusual since sometimes he stays up late when friends are over. But I checked my phone and saw a string of texts from him. The messages said things like, "It's embarrassing having people over when the house looks like this," and, "You knew they were coming, I can't believe you didn't even vacuum." He said it felt disrespectful to him and his friends and that it made him feel like I didn't care about him being proud of the home he brings people into. The next morning, I asked him about it, and he doubled down. He told me he didn't understand why I couldn't have taken an hour to vacuum, mop, and pick up clutter. He pointed out that I had a couple of hours before bed and claimed I was being inconsiderate by not making the effort. I told him that I had reached my limit that night. That I physically and mentally didn't have anything more to give after work. I explained that I did not clean out of spite. I just didn't have it in me. I told him that if he wants to maintain the arrangement where I do most of the cleaning, then he needs to accept that it gets done on my schedule, when I have time, energy, and motivation. If something's urgent, he's welcome to pick up the vacuum himself or push the mop around. He looked at me like I had slapped him. He said I was being spiteful by saying that and that my comments sounded like I was trying to make a point instead of being supportive. He said I knew he doesn't like cleaning and that's why I usually do it, but now it felt like I was using that as a weapon. That honestly hurt, because I've been keeping this home running for 4 years with minimal complaining, and now that I hit a wall, it's suddenly a personal affront. I'm frustrated because this isn't just about the one night. It's about the unspoken expectations that I will always rally, no matter how tired I am. That I will make the house look good on short notice, that I will keep up appearances for his friends. Never mind the fact that I never get to have friends over because of his sleep schedule, or that I never ask him to clean in preparation for anything. I don't think it's fair that he expected me to drop everything and deep clean on demand just because he told me someone was coming over. I don't think it's fair that he took that one night and made it into a judgment of my commitment to our home or to him. And I certainly don't think I'm being spiteful for being honest about what I can and can't do on any given day. So, I guess I'm asking, am I the asshole for not staying up to clean the house before his friends came over? Even though I was totally exhausted and just didn't have it in me. Update 1. A few days after that argument, things between us settled into a kind of strained silence. We were polite, sure. He still kissed me on the forehead before leaving for work, and I still packed away the leftovers from dinner like I always do. But the warmth between us had thinned. Conversations were reduced to logistics: who's walking the dog, what time is your shift ending, do you need anything from the store? It was civil, but it wasn't close. And the worst part? I think we both knew it. Then, like clockwork, Mark brought it up again. Another late-night hangout. Another vague announcement dropped halfway through dinner prep, like it was no big deal. He leaned against the counter and said he'd be having a couple of his friends over after his shift, like he was telling me the weather forecast. But what made my stomach twist was the look he gave me right after. That slight expectant pause, eyes flicking toward the living room floor like it was my cue. Like I should leap into action, scrub the baseboards, light a candle, and make it look like no one had lived here all week. I didn't take the bait. I looked him in the eye and said, I'm still overwhelmed at work. I'm not cleaning tonight. Then I turned back to chopping vegetables like I hadn't just dropped a weight on the floor. He didn't argue. He just made a sound, somewhere between a scoff and a breath, and walked away. That night, I stuck to my routine. Washed the dishes. Took out the trash. Set my alarm. Went to bed early. I was drained. The week had chewed me up and spat me out. Deadlines were looming, 2 coworkers were out on medical leave, and I was covering their responsibilities in addition to my own. My back ached. My mind raced. I wanted sleep more than I wanted anything else in the world. It must have been around 3 a.m. when I woke up needing to use the bathroom. I padded down the hallway in the dark, hoping I wouldn't run into anyone on the way. That's when I heard voices. Laughter. The low murmur of conversation and beer bottles clinking in the kitchen. I paused by the doorframe and heard Mark's voice clear as day, louder than the rest. He was laughing. I couldn't see his face, but I could picture the smug little grin as he said, "Yeah, sorry it's a bit messy. Jen has been slacking on the house stuff lately." The word sliced through the dark like a knife. Slacking. My chest tightened. I backed away before they noticed me and went back to bed, heart pounding, jaw clenched. The next morning, I didn't storm into the kitchen. I didn't throw his words in his face or demand an apology. I just made my coffee, sat at the counter, and asked, calmly, what he meant by what he said. He shrugged. No remorse. No backtracking. He actually doubled down, said it was the truth. That it is my responsibility. That I work during the day and he works nights, and that I've always been better at keeping the place clean anyway. He said it like it was some kind of fair division of labor. Like the hours I spend staring at spreadsheets and answering to a micromanaging boss don't count. Like the mental exhaustion I carry home each day isn't as valid because I punch out while the sun is still up. He looked me in the eye and said, "You know, I hate cleaning," like that was a legitimate excuse. As if disliking something means you get to be exempt from it. As if I love cleaning. As if anyone loves dragging a vacuum through 3 rooms at 9 p.m. on a Thursday after a full day of work. I didn't argue with him. Not then. I nodded once, picked up my mug, and walked away. But something in me shifted. I could feel it like a click, a lock turning in my chest. I realized, in that moment, that Mark didn't see what I do as labor. He saw it as default. Invisible. Expected. He doesn't appreciate the structure and comfort he benefits from, he just assumes it will always be there, like hot water or clean laundry. And when it's not perfect, he gets embarrassed. Not because he respects the space, but because it reflects on him. Because the state of our home is, in his mind, my performance. That realization didn't come with rage. It came with clarity. If he was going to keep treating the house like a hotel he was too good to vacuum in, maybe it was time to shake things up. Update 2. 2 nights later, I decided I was done being the passive participant in a dynamic that had slowly been eating away at my peace. I was done tiptoeing around his late-night hangouts, done being the silent maid whose work was invisible until it wasn't done. I wanted him to feel what it was like to have his space disrupted, his expectations flipped. Not out of spite, but out of sheer, exhausted clarity. So I pulled out my phone and texted 3 of my closest friends, Rachel, Maria, and Tiff. The message was short and simple: come over Friday night. Don't bring wine. Bring sass. They didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. These women had been through years of friendship with me, they had seen the highs, the lows, the messy middle parts. And they knew, from the wording alone, that this wasn't a social visit. It was a statement. They just replied with variations of, on it, and, see you then. Friday came faster than expected, and I didn't touch a single cleaning supply. The apartment was lived in. Not dirty, but far from spotless. A couple throw blankets were scattered across the couch, mail still piled near the entry table, and dishes from breakfast sat drying on the rack. Normally, I'd straighten up before having people over. But this time, I wanted it exactly as it was. The version of home that Mark seemed so offended by, the version I lived in when I was too tired to perform domestic perfection. I set the scene. I popped 3 bags of buttery popcorn and dumped them into a giant ceramic bowl. I lit one of my favorite candles, the eucalyptus and mint one that fills the room with calm. I put on a playlist of early 2000s throwbacks and fluffed the pillows. And then I opened the door to my girls. They arrived in full force. Rachel brought her signature attitude and a bag of neon face masks she insisted we all try. Maria had homemade brownies and her blunt, no-nonsense commentary. Tiff showed up in leopard print slippers and carried enough gossip to fuel a sitcom. Within minutes, the apartment was alive with laughter and chaos. Shoes were kicked off by the door, music thumped softly through the walls, and the coffee table was overtaken by snacks, nail polish, and a half-empty bottle of sparkling water someone spilled and then dabbed it with a paper towel. It was perfect. Around midnight, the front door clicked open. Mark walked in, gym bag slung over his shoulder, still in his work clothes. He froze in the entryway. The apartment looked nothing like the quiet, cleaned-up space he usually came home to. And there we were, 4 women sprawled across the furniture like queens in a conquered land, the smell of popcorn and face masks in the air. Rachel turned toward him first, wide-eyed and half-grinning, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "So this is the guy who thinks vacuuming is a personality flaw." The room exploded with laughter. Mark stood there, unsure of what to say. Then Maria, accidentally, knocked over the bowl of chips onto the rug and casually said, "Oops. Wonder if the maid's gonna be upset." They were relentless. Not cruel, but pointed. They teased him, accusing him of being the messy one, asking if he ever did the dishes or just expected the cleaning fairy to take care of it all. Tiff made a joke about how men think toilet paper just replenishes itself. It was outrageous and hilarious and very clearly a performance, but a performance with purpose. Mark's face went through a spectrum of emotions. Confusion, irritation, defensiveness. He didn't fight back. He didn't even really engage. He stood there holding his bag, shifting his weight like he wasn't sure where to stand or how to exist in a space that, for once, wasn't shaped around his comfort. After a minute, he mumbled something about taking a shower and disappeared down the hall. The girls stayed for another hour. We painted our nails, watched dumb TikToks, and laughed until we cried. And when they finally left, hugging me goodbye and whispering things like, "Good for you," I closed the door behind them and felt something in my chest settle. Not revenge. Not victory. Just a small flicker of balance tipping back into place. About 20 minutes later, he came out of the bedroom. His hair was wet. He looked less angry and more wounded. He told me I had been immature. That I embarrassed him. That it was manipulative to invite people over just to make a point. I listened. Then I said, "Funny, that's how I felt when your friends heard you say I'm slacking." He didn't yell. He didn't even raise his voice. He just stood there, staring at me, with this look on his face like I had betrayed some secret trust. He said I was making him out to be the bad guy. That I was taking things too far. That this wasn't how mature adults resolve conflict. And then, without waiting for a response, he turned and stormed off to the garage. I heard the door slam, and then silence. For a moment, I stood there staring at the door, heart thudding in my chest, guilt trying to crawl its way into my stomach. I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered all the times I cleaned up messes he never saw, and the judgment in his eyes when I couldn't do it just once. Update 3. The week after my impromptu girls' night ambush settled into something eerily calm, like the eye of a storm. Mark had clearly decided that if he pretended hard enough, the awkwardness would resolve itself. He didn't bring up the night, the comments, the fact that his friends had watched him get clowned for not knowing how to use a broom. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just polite small talk and reheated leftovers, like we had mutually agreed to hit a mental reset button. Only, we hadn't. The silence wasn't peace. It was avoidance. A thin, brittle truce resting on the hope that I'd quietly slide back into the role he preferred, efficient, accommodating, invisible in my labor. But something in me had shifted, tectonically, and I was done with being the default setting for domestic function. The turning point came midweek, when he mentioned, so casually it felt rehearsed, that he might have the guys over again next weekend. His voice was neutral, deliberately light. No apology. No offer to help clean up beforehand. No acknowledgement that the last time he tried this, it ended with him retreating to the garage like a sulking teenager. It was just the same soft demand, delivered with that familiar expectation, that I would handle it. That was the moment I realized I'd been hoping he would get it, without realizing he had no reason to. Why would he? The system worked beautifully for him. I did the unseen work. I maintained the space. I sacrificed rest and sanity to keep everything running smoothly. And in return, he never had to question how anything functioned. His clothes showed up clean. The trash took itself out. Dinner appeared like magic. The toilet never reeked, the dog never tracked dirt, and the paper towels never ran out. Of course he thought the house was ours, but the labor was mine. So I decided to show him exactly what it meant to share space. I spent the following Sunday morning in my pajamas with a coffee mug and a kind of righteous focus I usually reserve for tax season. I built a digital masterpiece, a Google sheet so aggressive in its color-coded clarity that it practically glowed. The title? Team Home Base, Equal Partners Edition. I gave it bold headings, alternating columns, task rotation by week, and a pastel palette that was deceptively cheerful. Beneath the bright exterior was the foundation of accountability. Every regular chore was included. The daily stuff, dishes, wiping down counters, feeding the dog, checking the mail. The weekly stuff, vacuuming, mopping, cleaning out the fridge, laundry. The thankless stuff, refilling soap dispensers, cleaning hair from the drain, scooping poop from the backyard. Nothing was too small or too gross. If it was something I'd done in silence 100 times, it was on the list. Each task had checkboxes, reminders, and rotating assignments. No one would get stuck with the same job week after week. Mark walked in while I was formatting the final column. He stood behind me reading over my shoulder, eyes narrowing as he scanned the spreadsheet like it was written in a foreign language. He scoffed. He muttered that it was a bit much. He said it looked like I was trying to run the house like a corporation. But he didn't say stop. He didn't close the tab. He didn't delete the file. That was the moment I knew I had him. Then I laminated the weekly schedule and pinned it to the fridge with coordinated magnets. I set Google Calendar reminders. I linked the sheet to a shared folder and pinged it to his email with the subject line, Living Like Adults 101. Every Monday, a new rotation. Every Sunday night, a shared notification asking if all tasks were complete. It was clean, organized, and weaponized with optimism. But I wasn't done. The piece de resistance was the point system. For every week we both completed our assigned chores, we got a shared reward, takeout from our favorite Indian spot, plus a movie night of the other person's choice. If either of us missed 2 or more tasks in a week, the other was owed a 30-minute foot massage. I knew exactly what I was doing. Mark loathes feet. He winces when I take my socks off. The idea of voluntarily touching mine for half an hour. He looked physically ill just thinking about it. But it was fair. Tangible stakes. Equal effort, equal reward, or consequences. And something amazing happened. He started vacuuming. Not just the middle of the carpet, but under the couch cushions. He did the dishes 3 nights in a row without prompting. I came home from work to find the dog's food bin refilled, the trash taken out, and the toilet brush actually wet from use. He marked off tasks in the sheet, sometimes with emojis, like it was a competition he had suddenly decided he could win. He asked which mop I preferred, and then bought it. He reorganized the spice rack one night, just because it looked chaotic. And when he saw me standing in the doorway, stunned, he grinned and said, "Spreadsheet says I'm on bathroom duty tomorrow. Any specific cleaner you like?" 3 weeks in, the house looked better than it had in months. The clutter was gone, the kitchen sparkled, and I stopped feeling like I was one step away from snapping every time I opened a cabinet and found an empty roll of paper towels. We were talking more. Laughing more. There was less tension hovering between us, waiting to be tripped over like an unseen laundry pile. He even started complimenting the system to friends, quietly, like he didn't want to give me too much credit, but still. Progress. One night I came home late after a hellish day at work, and the lights were dim, the trash had been taken out, the dog was fed, and he was already halfway through folding laundry on the couch. There was a movie paused on the screen and takeout on the table. He looked up and said, "Everything's checked off." In that moment, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt seen. It wasn't that he suddenly loved chores. It was that he understood, finally, what it looked like to share the work of living together. To contribute not just when it's convenient, but because it matters. So no, I don't think I was the asshole. I think I was tired of being invisible. I think I was past the point of asking nicely for consideration that should have come naturally. I think I was done pretending that mutual respect grows from silence. And instead of yelling, instead of walking out, I stayed, and I turned my frustration into structure. I drew a line in pixels and pings and color-coded boxes, and somehow, it turned into balance. And honestly, it worked.